Hey Goblins, if you like this podcast, do us a favor, throw us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcasting app of choice. Also, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers. We got a special one coming for you this week. We're going to try and do something different for a couple weeks. Give you something a little bit additional. We hope you enjoy it, and thank you for your support. Please tell a friend. Hey everybody, welcome to a special off-week episode of the Goblins and Growlers podcast. I'm Brandon at Way of Brandalore, and joining me today is not Josh, but is...
Hi, I'm Gabriel. You can find me at Instagram at Amethyst Audiomancer. You've heard me before, I think, on this show at least once.
Yeah, you may remember him from our Halloween episode where we talked about Mask of the Red Death, the old D&D module.
When I show up on this show, I try to make sure that it messes up the regularly scheduled programming.
we got to give Josh his excuse. He had a bunch of stuff going on this weekend, and the reason we're talking today is because we went ahead and watched the first 3 episodes of The Legend of Vox Machina that dropped on Friday the 28th, which would just, then this is coming out Monday the 31st. So everybody's had a weekend to digest it, not counting the folks who backed it, who got to watch it early.
Watch it early.
Yeah, but Josh had a lot of stuff going on this weekend and did not have enough time to watch 3 episodes of television and then talk about it all in one weekend. Because
that's understandable.
That's the way they did this. They're dropping 3 episodes now, and then next week 3 episodes, and then next week 3 episodes, and the next week 3 episodes. So it's 12 episodes, but they've got sort of an odd release cadence for them, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, I mean, I especially considering the original Critical Role show is it's a weekly thing, except for the few times that they would take breaks. But like going from a weekly show that's 3 to 5 hours an episode to
Yeah,
3 episodes a week that don't even come close to 2 hours if you add them all together.
I just as a disclosure, I guess, I have actually never watched or listened to any Critical Role. So
Fair.
please, as we talk about this, everything I say, remember it in the context of Brandon has never watched or listened to Critical Role and thus has no connection to any of these characters and is not emotionally invested in anything they're doing.
Well, I'm really excited to hear your opinions because of that. Because like I watched uh what I feel is a very sizable amount of Critical Role. Although I haven't finished the first season. Um, because there are only so many hours in a year that I have access to for
Mm-hmm.
fun things. Um, but I was watching it like I think at one point because I was watching it really early on. I think I was only 10 episodes behind at one point, and then it very quickly outran me.
Yeah, I'm much more of the Adventure Zone kind of guy.
Yeah.
Since I'm also from West Virginia, so I connect with those guys. And I was also in college with one of them.
Oh, heck yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, when the Adventure Zone gets their animated series and we review that, I can tell that story.
Yes. Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody
But
sponsor that one.
yeah, but I took a bunch of notes while I was watching this. I watched episodes 1 and 2 yesterday, Friday evening, and fell asleep, not because of the quality of the content, but because I'd been up all day and I was very tired. And then I finished up this morning, Saturday, watching episode 3 and took a bunch of notes on it. What was your experience there, Gabe?
I mean, I watched episode 1 last night with my mom. Um and it had a good time. And then people started coming home. My family came over. I've family coming in from out of town, so like that kind of got tossed up and around. And then I've succeeded in watching the other 2 episodes at random intervals throughout this morning to just a little while ago.
Yeah,
Um,
it's about 6:45 on Saturday evening when we're doing this right now.
yeah. So I did watch all 3. Um, and I watched them attentively enough to uh, at least have an opinion,
Okay.
a couple opinions.
Okay. All right. I have several opinions too, and I think we can start sharing them now.
Yes,
Um, I'm
I
just gonna
think
start. I'm gonna go ahead.
I was gonna say I think we should start with like because I noticed when I was taking notes, the notes I had for the first episode are very long, and
Hmm.
then going on, they got shorter and shorter. But I think that's because the first episode also carries the weight of introducing the show,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so a lot of those notes are just talking about first impressions. So what were some of your first impressions?
Um, from a sort of production standpoint, my first impression was the animation quality seemed to sort of oscillate between cheap looking
Hmm.
and fantastic animated CG.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm really not trying to speak poorly of it because whenever I tell people that I don't listen to Critical Role, it is usually interpreted as me trying to act like I'm better than them because I don't
Oh,
watch Critical Role. I have nothing against Critical Role. I just can't make time for it. So I just want to make super explicit, like I'm not saying anything against Critical Role. This is just me watching this with no emotional connection to it and
right.
just my reactions to it. But the animation felt kind of cheap. Back like right before, like right in around the 2006 to 2010 or 2010 era, um, Marvel Animation had a couple of projects that were out there, and this was like before the MCU stuff really caught on. And Avi Arad was in charge of those because he was in charge of Marvel Television, and he was notorious for being a real penny pincher about
Hmm.
everything. So all the animation quality on all those shows really sucked. And
I
there
think I
were
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, like there was a Fantastic Four series that came out around then, and it was just really
Yeah.
really bad animation.
I remember how bad that was. Yes.
Yeah, so there were some scenes that really felt like that, and eh, I don't think they were trying to do it on the cheap. I wonder if maybe because since it was a Kickstarter thing, maybe there were just some financial constraints and they wanted to get 12 episodes out, so maybe they had to go to this animation studio or that animation studio to do like
Right.
some of the traditional animation stuff. However, having said that, when they needed to do CG stuff, it was fantastic. Oh, and by the way, this is a spoiler review, so if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it and then come back and listen
Yes.
to it.
Yeah. Go
So,
watch it because we will reference specific things. I certainly will be.
such as this, like when the dragon showed up, when the blue dragon showed up, that was excellent CG.
Yeah.
The battle scene, excellent CG. It was like great fight choreography too. Like there was
Yeah.
such a
The
great flow
fight
to it.
choreography in all the episodes, like I loved the fight choreography. The animation for combat
Hmm.
was or so far has been fantastic. Um but yeah, similarly, like I will notice during like dialogue scenes, and I can't super fault it. Like, if you watch the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, those first couple episodes, animation's kind of rough, um, kind of wild. But by the second season, it's really starting to get a whole lot better. But there were a lot of times in all the episodes, but especially the first one, of Legend of Vox Machina, where like two characters would be talking, but you would see lots of other characters in the background, but like a lot of stuff would be just static
Hmm.
background. Like the trees, nothing was moving. Maybe there was a cloud or something, but it was
Yeah.
just two people talking with like nine people in camera, and the other like groups of people are just they're static drawings
Hmm.
that only change once they're interacted with.
Another thing that this animation reminded me of, and I actually just thought of it just now, but the Netflix Voltron cartoon.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I actually I never looked this up, and I probably could, but I'm not going to. It almost feels like it was the same animation house because Voltron had the same thing going on, where a lot of the traditional 2D animation felt very flat, felt kind of cheap. But then when
Yeah.
it switched over to like the Lions,
Yeah.
it was really good. But I will say that Vox Machina's CG is better than Voltron CG.
Yes. Yeah, like the look and the feel of the dragon, the way it shifted and moved was fantastic.
Hmm.
Especially like its big lightning breath thing. Um it was unique visualization. Um, I will say, kind of getting into the specifics of episode 1. Um, like one thing that I loved, but it created an interesting for me cognitive dissonance. Having seen or watched like a good chunk of the first season of Critical Role, uh, like this is vastly different. I don't even think that uh the show starts with the adventurers already like close to level 10 and in the middle of a specific adventure.
Mhm.
And this the Legend of Vox Machina starts with them slightly before they would have gone on that adventure, and then skips that adventure entirely and goes to a continuation of a new one.
Oh, so
Um,
is it like episode 1 and 2 take place before the beginning of the show, and then episode
yes,
3 takes place after that?
yes. Episode 3 is like what 30 episodes in or
Oh,
something.
okay.
Which I will say, the reason I kind of like that is because, and this is again something that you probably don't know, but in the show, they had another cast member,
Mhm,
Orion Akaba playing, Tiberius Stormwind, I believe, a Dragonborn, uh, sorcerer who actually played a pretty like a critical role in a lot of that, like earlier that the adventure at the beginning of the stream when they just started streaming it.
mhm.
Um, but Orion did leave the show at one point. I believe very amicably, but I it appears that in The Legend of Vox Machina, they were not going to reprise his character at all,
Oh, okay.
and
Well,
so they
that's
had
pretty
to
sensible then.
rewrite a huge chunk at the beginning of the adventure because he was, uh, very, like, critical. Like, one of the main things that I noticed, immediately, was the interactions with the, like, king and all of that and, like, Lady Alora and all that, because these are characters that I remember, but their interactions are significantly different. Like, the group is more established in their abilities, but at the same time, less established in their renown,
Mhm.
as opposed to, like, in the game, in the actual D&D game that they were playing early on, they didn't really have as many of their abilities. Like, Scanlan had not gotten access to Big B's hand yet, which he called Scanlan's hand.
Right.
In this, and there's like a handful of other spells and abilities that none of them had access to yet by the time they were doing that specific adventure. Um, but again, like so it creates that dissonance because I'm like, wait, no, that's wrong. But also, I mean, it's not my story, so I like they can do whatever they want with it. So it's not wrong. It's just we strangely different.
I'm sure you're having the same feelings that many Game of Thrones fans had.
Yes, where you're like, okay, that's an interesting take. It's not bad at all. Like I also I really like how they one thing that I've loved about like the Critical Role content that's come out, whether it's the uh Explorer's Guide to Wildmount or any of that, is their attention to creating new stuff that is similar to a lot of the older things, like creating new gods that actually feel kind of unique and they're not just like, Paylor and uh like all the gods that we know from Greyhawk settings,
Mhm,
which they used in the Critical Role campaign. But when they were creating like their own official content, they had to change stuff around. And uh even like in this, having the blue dragon, like it didn't look like the regular blue dragon
mhm.
from D&D. You could tell it was a blue dragon because it was, well, blue, and shot lightning. But a lot of his other like characteristics were not the same as the quintessential blue dragon that you see in um, Forgotten Realms stories and things like that.
I wanna read the paragraph I wrote, uh, just sort of summarizing my thought on the pilot, the
Yes.
two-part pilot, and then we can just, like, go off of that. And this is just verbatim what I typed out this morning. The two-part pilot was my least favorite of the 3 episodes released this week. Pilots are almost always the worst entries into a series because they're burdened with establishing characters in an extremely limited window of time. I
Yeah,
don't think it fell prey to the dreaded trope of informed attributes, though. The characters at least demonstrated their traits rather than informing the audience of them through dialogue.
that's true. Uh, but in I guess kind of with that, one of my main notes that I underlined was the pacing in the first episode is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
It is set up, resolve, set up. It's like it made me think of some of the pacing in like JoJo's Bizarre Adventures or Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Mhm.
But the significant difference there is that those shows aren't trying to build a sense of drama or intensity. Like Kimmy Schmidt's it's a comedy, like about a pretty horrific thing, and if you give the audience time to dwell, then that horror sets in. So the show has such like a lightning fast pace. But the first episode of this was like, oh, there's this really dramatic thing happening. Cool. So let's deal with it, and let's move on to this other dramatic thing that's happening. Cool. Let's deal with that. Move on to this. And it felt so fast. Like I had brain whiplash by the end of the first episode. It had to
Yeah.
take a minute.
If this hadn't been if this had been sort of a quote unquote original television series and not like based on some pre-existing content, like the entire first 2 episodes could have spread over probably 6 to 8 episodes.
Exactly. I think it wasn't until I got to the third episode that I realized why they were doing that so quickly, and
Mhm.
that's because they were. What I think is the case is they're trying to get to the Briarwood arc as
Mhm.
quick as possible because as the episodes went on, episode 1 was super fast paced, episode 2 was a bit slower, and then episode 3 was finally at like a comfortable storytelling pace.
Yeah. I
And
even
I
felt like episode 3 went a little bit quick, but we can talk about that when we get there.
yes.
Um as far as just specific notes that I have for episode 1 and 2, you just interrupt me. Um I want to talk a little bit about I guess this goes back to what I was saying about not informed attributes. Like the whole initial scene with the bar fight and everything existed to demonstrate everybody's personality.
Yes.
Um, and the initial notes that I wrote down were, "This is awfully tropey." Um,
Yes.
but I have a further explanation of that. This is what I wrote down. I said, Probably my biggest complaint about the show is that it's a parade of D&D tropes. The tragic backstory, the horny bard, the dumb barbarian. And it's easy to contextualize that, though, with the fact that it's actually based on a D&D campaign. So I really can't hold it against them, you know,
Fair.
because I wouldn't expect them to rewrite all that stuff to facilitate more polished storytelling. And I also wrote, that sounds like I'm digging at them, but I'm really not. Um,
Yeah. Well, so
because
kind of to
there was stuff that was tropey that I really liked, like when Grog was like, "I would like to rage" before he attacks
yes.
the dragon. I was like, okay, I had to give them like some beatnik snaps for that
Yes.
one. That
Well,
was good.
that's his catchphrase in the show too.
Oh well, then it makes even more sense.
Yeah. Like there were a lot of like every time the character would rage, Travis Willingham would say in a variety of ways, "I would like to rage."
Hmm.
Um but he would specifically say it in Grog's voice, which made it like it started off with him just saying, "Hey, I'd like to rage," and then eventually turned to the character going, "I would like to rage." Um, which again, those kinds of things are hilarious, but some like you were saying, it since it's based off of a pre-existing thing, I feel like parts of it are kind of sitting on like that hope that some of the viewers, most of the viewers, all the viewers have an understanding, a knowledge base to build off of
Hmm.
with the show, with the actual Critical Role show. Because some of the tropes did, and there's a lot of they feel like Easter eggs to me, but that's because I've seen it. But I feel like they're gonna be very very lost on people who have not seen Critical Role.
Hmm.
Um, I will say though, on your note about a lot of the tropes, that was one of the things that I both enjoyed in the beginning and then kind of led to me slowly, steadily not watching the show was because I
You mean the
Critical Role.
original? You mean the original?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
the original. Watching Critical Role because uh, a lot of the actors in it, or players, this is, like, their first, maybe second time playing D&D, and so a lot of them made, uh, very themself characters, like,
Mhm,
themself as like, a lot of players make themself as a character in their first time, and the more seasoned players made the more complex, like, Taliesin Jaffe making the Percy and Liam O'Brien making Vax'ildan, like the
mhm,
little more complex, little more edgy characters from the more seasoned players. But the tropes when I was watching it, I like as someone who's been playing D&D for so long, it felt like a lot of them were exemplifying the tropes
mhm.
in Critical Role, to the point that I'm like, okay, yeah, this is like what the 9,000th horny bard that I've seen. It's not bad. He's doing an amazing job with it, I will say, and the character development that he goes through is fantastic. But it's like I don't know. It wasn't as interesting to me, and I think they realized that when they did their second season, and you see how absolutely zany their characters are in comparison to the first season. Um, the first season was comfortable for them because they were leaning on tropes.
Okay. I mean, and there's really like there's nothing inherently wrong with tropes.
No,
If
they're
you're if you're
tropes are
if you're
tropes for
jo
a reason.
yeah, but if you're like when you're really genre savvy on something,
Yeah.
it gets really hard not to notice them.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Again,
Um,
it's still a super enjoyable show, and, like, the way they do them is excellent.
yeah, and talking about tropes, I did not expect initially the twist on the dragon's identity. Uh, Probably because like really expected the extreme telegraphing that they were doing in the other
Yeah.
direction with the other
Yes.
advisor to pay off because I was feeling like, oh, tropes are really like kicking in here. This is feeling very predictable. It's feeling very much like a point A to point B to point C kind of adventure story.
Yeah.
And I have no background for this because I've never watched it or listened to it. So so that's where I was on that. So when all of a sudden it was David Tennant who was
Right.
the dragon, I was like, oh, so that actually surprised me, even when probably most other people were not surprised.
I was well, I'll say I was not surprised because I saw that kind of twist coming. I was
Hmm.
hoping that they would give that twist.
Hmm.
Like, I saw it and I was like, "Oh, it seems like it's probably gonna be this creepy dude." But, it would make more sense if they twisted it and it made it this guy. Like, I think that would be better storytelling. And when it was that, I will say that adventure, like that whole thing, 1 and 2, again, that happened before the show, so they only talk about that later.
Hmm. And
Um, the whole
I
thing with, what's that? Brimscythe?
yeah,
The whole thing with Brimscythe happens before I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe that all that happened before.
that's what I was given to understand too.
Yeah.
But I I feel talking, how we were talking about how these first two episodes could have been almost their own sort of season.
Yeah.
I think it would have really benefited from giving a lot more motive, like less of a man with a black hat twirling his mustache motivation to Tennant's character, because
Yeah.
I didn't feel any deep motivation for that other than just like, this is how things are and should be.
Yeah. Well, so that's like another thing, like that character, the way that Mercer set up the storylines, the arcs within the original Critical Role season 1 was like a lot of them overlapped.
Hmm.
And so there were things like this particular adventure um where like the players like they're going and they solve the adventure kind of, but there's clearly a couple loose ends that they can't really explore too much.
Hmm.
And then but then immediately a new problem shows up and they have to deal with that, and then by the time they finish that problem, some aspect of the first problem shows up again. and like that starts to grow as well. So it's a layered storytelling. So I'm thinking in the second season, if this first season is primarily going to be the Briarwood arc, the second season is probably going to be returning to the foundation laid by episodes 1 and 2.
Okay. Well, that would be nice if that paid off.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say about Tennant's character is his voice work was exactly like his Scrooge McDuck voice work,
Uh-huh.
and I know that's way closer to his natural dialect
Yes.
than
As a
anything
Scotsman.
most people see him in. But it still really took me out of it because I expected him to start yelling about Flint Heart Glomgold or
Uh-huh.
something.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think
he
I think
sounded like
David
a
Tennant has
bigger
yeah, David Tennant has 2 settings, I think. He has the Doctor and Scrooge McDuck when he's doing voice work.
well, I mean, he also had the American accent Kilgrave, from the Jessica Jones series, although that one was closer to the Doctor.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah, because all those characters kinda have, like, that's the when David Tennant bares his teeth and gets all crazy,
Mhm, and it
and
feels
then
like
this
he's, like, talking through his teeth.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then the Scrooge I was definitely getting, uh, like, if Scrooge McDuck was, like, 6 feet tall and fatter, that's what the voice would have been.
Scrooge McDuck with meat.
Yes.
What else, what other thoughts do you have about the first 2 episodes?
Well, I did think I'm not sure how I feel about the show's logo being on the doors to the, Hall of Aman, like the Hall of the King. Like, when they get kicked out of the hall and they're gonna go investigate the creepy dude, and they're standing there, if you look at the doors, like, you see the D20 with the sword cross in it,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Hmm."
Did you notice the boulder in the cave that was a D20?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, those touches, I like them. I also like in some areas, like it being on the door, like, I don't know, it feels like too much of a nod, but that's entirely, like, a personal thing. If I wrote it, I'd do it differently, but I'm not the person writing it, so I also enjoyed it.
I didn't notice that. I know what the Critical Role logo looks like, but I
I
just
did
didn't
love the
notice that.
Dragonlance reference, though. That made me laugh out loud when they were in Gilmore's, and it was like, "Oh, you wanna kill a dragon? Here's a dragon killing lance." And I was like, "Aha, clever nod to the infamous Dragonlance series."
I've read a
Um,
couple of the Dragonlance books, but
yeah,
that's about it, and it was, like, 20 years ago.
um, I loved Gilmore, but I also loved Gilmore in the show, and the Critical Role show as well. Um, the interactions between Gilmore and Vax, I think was, like, the only romantic subplot that I actually enjoyed. Um, now I will say I'm not a huge romance in films, especially, and I'm even less of a fan in romance in TTRPGs.
Mhm.
Um, so that is like I'm laying that out as this is my personal thing, but I really enjoyed how Gilmore and Vax like got along in the original show, and I'd love to see more of that. I think Gilmore came out beautifully. Um, and the pacing was getting better. I do have that as a note.
I know Mercer does, a voice in, episode 3, the antagonist, but I thought it would
Oh,
be
Lord Briarwood.
yeah, I thought it would be fun if there was some sort of alternate audio track where everyone who was not the main characters was voiced by Matthew Mercer.
That would be amazing, and, I mean, he could.
That should
He
be like
did before.
an elite level of some sort of Kickstarter reward.
Yeah, yeah, if you gave, like, $10,000 to this project, then you get the Matthew Mercer NPC only. where every NPC is voiced by. I mean, Mercer is a tremendous voice actor, and the show it worked wonderfully with him as the only NPC voice bouncing around. I especially loved that he has like 5 different guard voices. And
Mhm,
so in my head during the show, it was like whenever the one like really worried guard would show up, um, like I always imagined it was the same guy just getting a different job in different places and always having a bad time. And I'm sure to a degree, Mercer did a lot of like the throwaway voices in this. I don't know for certain. I didn't check,
mhm.
but I think it'd be humorous if he did like the guard that says "Hey," and that's it. Um, they
I
just pitch it down
I
a
thought it was
half.
funny Felicia Day had a throwaway voice.
Who did Felicia Day do?
In episode 3, she was one of the bandits that,
Oh, that's right.
jumped them,
That's right.
and I didn't know that, like, I didn't know it until I was looking at IMDb, but I just thought
I
that was
remember.
really funny.
Did she have another character in the show? I feel like she should have.
Let's see.
Because I thought I saw her name show up for episode 2 as well, but I guess maybe that was the
It looks like she
end.
was okay, she was a captain in episode 2 and then, I guess, a bandit.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Um, I am. I will say, like, I did really enjoy the first, like, the episodes that I did see of Critical Role. It really was like only when they were getting into the later stuff that I started to lose interest. But the first group of stuff, especially the Briarwood arc, which is what they're leading into, I did really enjoy. Like, I thought it was beautiful storytelling. And much like every, Curse of Strahd or World of Darknessy thing, like a lot of them lean on the same tropes, but like we were talking before, like that's not a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, I even wrote
You
down
create the aesthetic.
when in my notes for episode 3, it's like, I'll hold off drawing the Strahd comparisons, though, because that's low-hanging fruit for criticism in a D&D product.
Exactly. It's like if you want to have like Strahd is Dracula, so if you can make that twist as well.
Yeah.
Um,
If had I been making the choice, I would have had Silas Briarwood arrive not in a coach that really feels like Strahd's, and I would,
right.
and wouldn't necessarily have had him as the lord of a land.
Yes. Well, I mean, it is a stolen land, thankfully.
Yeah,
And that
but
leads it
again,
into the
when this was
storyline.
when the original character was being written, there was probably never any thought given to maybe this will be an animated series someday. So we should really differentiate this from other parts of the product.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and at the same time, like perhaps like the lance, like the dragon lance, and there maybe they kept it as a nod to other
Mhm.
D&D products.
Either way, it didn't offend me because he's much more of a direct villain than Strahd. It
Yeah.
seems like because since Strahd's more of a manipulator and Briarwood definitely wants to get his hands dirty, or at least is not worried about getting his hands dirty.
Yes. Yeah, and the Briarwood arc, um, as someone and anybody listening knows already, as someone who is a very big fan of horror, the Briarwood arc was, I think, the only one that I actually felt like that feeling of dread,
Hmm.
which was also very impressive considering by the time that the players were in that setting, in that arc, their characters were all like level 9, 10, 11
Hmm.
in that realm. Mercer was doing XP leveling, so
Oh
a lot of
wow!
them were at different levels. Like some of them are level 11, while some are level 10.
I'll tell you, once I embraced milestone leveling, I'll never go back.
Yeah, and I have a feeling I haven't watched any of the recent seasons, but I have a feeling like that is probably where the rest of it sits too. Um, but yeah, like it's hard. Uh, Generally, I will say it's more difficult to make players and make the characters feel worried and scared once they get past like level 8 because then they have crazy powerful abilities.
Hmm.
But in the way that like the various methods that Mercer used to create that sense of building dread, and then excuse me. And then on top of that, having the all the different like the players, the actors lean into it so well. Like you saw at the end of 3 with that whole like Percy clearly kind of losing it,
Mhm.
um, screaming at the party and all this other stuff like that kind of thing. I love when players can lean into their character becoming like an inner party villain for a little
Mhm.
while because then it allows it to become that uh hopefully either that character just becomes a problem and they get killed off or something like that, or they have a redemption ability
It's
type of
just a
thing
more
later on.
interesting conflict to have to deal with something like that.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
when Star Trek started in the 60s and then when Next Generation started in the 80s, like Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was there is no interpersonal problems that people have. So there was no conflict between people because it was a utopian society and people had learned to deal with those kind of things. But the writers very quickly realized that that makes it very difficult to write effective stories and drama.
Right.
So once Roddenberry was pushed out, that's when we got stuff like Deep Space Nine, which is built on
Yeah.
the back of sort of basically interparty or intra-party conflict,
Yes.
because it just makes things more interesting than a group against an external force. A group against an external force plus an internal force
Yeah.
is way more captivating.
The various like twists that the 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 whole Briarwood arc had that lean into that. I loved. I really did. I'm not ashamed to say it.
If that's the direction the rest of this is going, I'm looking forward to it because episode 3 is where I really felt like it got going and I really started to get drawn into it. Like new antagonists tied directly to the capital T, capital B tragic backstory of a
Yeah.
main character. Um, I love stories that deal with vampires. Like I said, I'm willing to set aside the Strahd comparisons just to see where the story goes because I have
Yeah.
no idea. But if the rest of it can continue on kind of like that, I'll be down for it. And they ended it on a little bit of a cliffhanger with them getting arrested, but I imagine that'll be resolved relatively quickly in episode 4.
I mean, as if the current set of pacing is anything, I don't think you have to worry about anything taking longer than
Hmm.
what 5 minutes
The
to
probably
resolve.
the only disappointment I really had with episode 3 is that they burned the large gala trope, but it didn't involve the party having to infiltrate it or something.
Yeah,
That's
like they
whenever
were invited.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever you're gonna have a big thing like that, a masquerade ball, a diplomatic, gala, something like that, the party always needs to have to infiltrate.
Right. We've actually run a couple of ventures like that at Goblins and Growlers.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Uh,
wrote one for a paid campaign I was hired to do.
oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, so that was nice.
Yeah, and those are like a lot of fun. And as far as like leaning into the tropes, I do feel like that. But who knows? Maybe they will have to do that later on. Um, it is it is different. The only thing that I felt was like, oh, I recognize this well was episode 3.
Mhm.
And I think that was that's the goal. They sped through episodes 1 and 2 so they could slow down in episode 3 and be like, cool. So here's the thing. But like you were saying, it's still a pretty quick pacing.
It's kinda weird how they decided to do the release schedule because, like we talked about at the top, they're doing 3 every week
Yeah,
for 4
4
weeks to get the
weeks.
12 episodes. As I was watching last night and this morning, it just felt to me like it would have made more sense to release parts 1 and 2 as sort of like a mini premiere movie. And then,
Yeah,
3 and 4 the following week, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So essentially, then you would have 6 weeks of release rather than 4. And the stories would have chunked together a little bit because you would have had the premiere and then you would have immediately gotten into the Briarwood arc.
yeah. Well, I mean, at the same time, maybe that's why they had the 3. They did 1, 2, and 3 because like Did episode 2 end with anything leading into Briarwood arc other than the
No,
occasional name drop?
they got the keep, and
Yeah,
then the episode 3 started with them living in the keep.
which in the Critical Role show, they called it, Castle Grayskull, so I'm interested to see what they call it in
Yeah.
this.
Now, if this show were on
Not
Netflix
that,
instead of Amazon Prime, they might be able to call it Castle Grayskull.
right?
Uh, what did
Um,
what did you feel about the episode run times? Because they're very much formatted, it seems, for the possibility of airing on actual television since
right?
they're
Like, when
since
you
they're
told
like
me they were
yeah,
from
episode 3
22 to
was
26, it's like, well, that sounds like 30 minutes with commercials.
yeah, episode 3 was 24 minutes. Episode 1 I think was 27, episode 2 was 28. But you add those together,
Okay.
that's 40 minutes and that's an hour long with commercials.
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be super cool. I
Mhm.
think I would love for this to be, like, the first step in well, okay, the first step in, people getting their campaigns, like, the very interesting ones sort
Mhm.
of published in this way, not just in comic book form, although I do love the comic book forms, but I don't know, I don't really have too much thought on that.
While you search for your words, I'm just going to point out I just realized that I added together 27 and 28 and got 40, which is absolutely not the answer to that math problem.
Yeah, it's 40. Um,
But I still think that it's all set up for being able to be aired on actual television.
yeah, well, so
There'll
I
be a
think
syndication deal at some point.
I think it would be very interesting, for that to be a thing. I don't see actual television or regular television continuing to be a thing because I feel like with all the streaming services, those are slowly dying out. Unless you're watching Hulu, which does have
Yeah,
commercials.
Hulu's set up for commercials and over the air television. I don't like cable may start to wane at some point, but over the air television is still there. And there are all those digital sub channels that always want
Is it?
programming.
Oh, bless their heart.
Yeah. So, yeah,
I forget that it still exists, I guess.
yeah, I don't watch it, but it's definitely there and there are people who do, especially when you have cable companies who will like bundle it with your internet and stuff.
Right. DirecTV is still a thing. As my neighbor has it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would have loved it if the episodes were closer to 45 minutes apiece.
Yeah.
Essentially an hour
Yes.
long show, because you got a show with 6 main protagonists. It's very difficult to have like real character depth in each like in an episode with that.
Is it? Oh, is it only 6? I thought it was 7.
It might
Or
be
maybe
7.
7.
I was just throwing a number out there when I was
Could
putting my
be.
notes together. I didn't
Uh,
count.
but it's
But
still
that
like
only
that was.
strengthens my argument
I
if
know,
it's
and
7.
I fully agree, and I think that's why one of my friends actually said recently when they watched it that their favorite thing about Critical Role when they were watching it was the dialogue, the longer moments in between the action,
Mhm.
because like they're all professional voice actors, they're actors, they're improv actors. They know how to build scenes and do that and build that drama and digest a scene after it happens. Oh, Percy, you know, what is this horrible thing that's happening? And then Percy goes on, there was a dark and stormy night and the dreary backstory of a character.
Mhm.
And like that build up, that conversation. And that's why those episodes were like 4 hours long because they had a 20-minute intermission between full sessions of D&D. Um, and that was and that's not even talking about the episodes that were like entirely combat. But um in this, I feel like they focused a lot more on how like badass the combat could be and started to take away some from the dialogue and the intrigue, which I think if they had it at 40-minute episodes, that definitely could have been a thing. They could have had longer dialogue, they could have had more time to digest a scene.
Yeah, and I mean also you got to think about this being designed for an overlap, but also for a different kind of consumer that's not going to be watching a 4-hour show.
Yeah,
Um,
like yourself.
yeah, exactly. And I don't have time for that in my life anymore, so I'm
Right?
not going to do it. But they have to make concessions to the storytelling in
Yeah.
various ways. Like I think they were probably given the budget to do X minutes of animation, and they chose to do 12 at 30 rather than 6 at 60.
Yeah. And that makes sense.
Yeah, it helps tell more discrete chapters.
But I guess in that same vein, like I know a lot of people backed this project.
Hmm.
Um and I know that, Critical Role as a company in themselves, um I don't know what their specific finances are, but I definitely would say that having this been something closer to like season 2 of The Witcher, obviously a very different budget, a very different show, but a similar style of storytelling of like, adventuring party adventurers going on, uh like the a hero's journey esque thing, but it's a group of people, not just one.
Hmm.
Um, and that pull back and forth, but like again, one of the big things that I don't have in Legends of Vox Machina is other than when the episode ends, is time to digest the scene. But
Hmm.
I'm not seeing the characters digesting a scene. Like that's something in a lot of dramas, which
Hmm.
considering there are only so many jokes in this, I would have to say like this is in that realm of action drama comedy. Um, the one of the big things in a drama is like when a character, like if a character dies or if a character loses something or something horrible happens, like there you should have that scene where you see that character dwell for
Hmm.
at least a moment, and then someone comes to comfort them and they have a conversation as to why or something like that. And it doesn't have to be long. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. Um, but with how quick the pacing was, um, I think they lose a chunk of the gravitas, the gravity
Hmm.
that should be there for drama,
Yeah,
especially for D&D drama.
yeah. I went to the Kickstarter page and was able to answer a couple of our questions
Perfect.
because I went back through it because it's from 2019, so like everything's still there. Yeah, it was originally for episodes 1 and 2, which were pitched as a special. So that's why it
That makes
has a
sense.
discrete beginning and end. Um,
Yeah.
and then all the rest of them are Briarwood, or at least through episode 10. But there are like 12 or 13 episodes. Uh, yeah, there's 12 episodes, so I guess they got money for an extra two.
Okay. Nice, nice.
What are your sort of final thoughts, and what are your like favorite and least favorite characters? And did it change between when you listened before and watched this?
Um, so some of my final thoughts are definitely like I am interested to see the rest of the show. I like the animation style overall, even though again, some of it, like the dialogue scenes sometimes feel really flat. But like you just said, those first two episodes were done differently than the rest. So I think that's why they did 3 episodes, because they're like, here's the pilots and also here's the show
Hmm.
afterwards. So you get the context, and then here's the thing that we're spending a little bit more time and money and effort on episode 3 onward. Um I also I think they had a really tricky problem with not including Orion Akaba's character at all. I
Hmm.
mean, and they might later on, as like a nod, but at the moment I don't think that they're like planning on having that character exist at all. Um and that was that's a very tricky problem to do, because that'd be like for, you know, quid pro role to suddenly be without Johannes or something.
Hmm.
And you're like, "Okay, how do I tell this story now?" And I did I love Scanlan, and I hate Scanlan. Um, Scanlan was my favorite in the show, in the original show as well. Um, just because of how, uh, Sam Riegel plays that character and, like, really got into the silliness of the role. Uh, but at the same time, it also led to, like, there being, almost every bard I would run into at brewery games was, some version of Scanlan.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
Scanlan was my least favorite character.
yeah, and
Because
go
I,
on.
I play a bard a lot, so maybe I just don't like what I'm seeing in the mirror. Because any bard interpretation I have is not derived from him since I'd never seen him before. But
Yeah,
I think I think sexual humor is like the lowest common denominator
mm,
and doesn't do much for me in terms of like clever entertainment. So I don't really care for stuff like that. And since his character is, at least at this point in time, like built around that
yeah,
archetype, it just doesn't do anything for me. And also like various things with his character, I don't like things that seem culturally and temporally out of place in a story. So when he started rapping, like to me
oh,
that took me out of it
and put the glasses
completely.
on.
Yeah, it took me out of it completely rather than me saying, "Oh, well that's clever."
Yeah. I mean, the Critical Role show, there were like, he would do that a lot, but it was like it was in that realm of, it because it's a D&D game,
Yeah.
it fits better because everyone knows, like, "Haha, yeah, he's making a reference to something that doesn't exist." Um, and that sort of feel, um, like, there was a large, portion of time that he would put on like a fake mustache, and parade himself around by the name of, I think he used 2 different, like, American actors,
Mhm.
um, but, use their names, and so their names became real in that world, even though they're still referencing, like, real life American actors.
Yeah, and it's the kind of, like you said, it's the kind of thing that if it had happened around a table when I'd been playing, I would have been like, "Ah, ha, 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 that's clever."
Exactly.
But for a television series, I didn't really care for it.
Yeah, and I can agree with that, and I think that's part of, again, where the original show, despite the thing I liked least about it being how long episodes were and how long the show was, that also allowed for so much more character growth between scenes and between episodes and things like that. Where in this, you're seeing, kind of everyone at their worst.
Mhm.
Um, Keyleth has no confidence and still has no confidence, but eventually she'll probably get some. And uh, Grog is, they're like each person. I don't want to get into any spoilers for you, but each person has their flaws that they need to work through, and like Scanlan being just incredibly horny and weirdly direct about it a lot, is certainly a flaw. And I think, again, when they were playing, because I'm not certain, but I think this was Sam Riegel's first character.
Mhm.
Could be second, could be third, but it definitely felt like a first character because, again, they leaned hard on tropes during character creation and design, but then once they started making it a show, they realized they needed to allow the characters to grow up. Otherwise, like, the fan base was going to be like, well, this character is just a horny bard. But then when the horny bard then gives, like, you know deep complex wisdom that showcases why he has this hedonistic viewpoint, and that the hedonistic viewpoint is actually hiding something deeper, like, oh, that character development, and then it goes on and goes on. So I'm interested to see where that goes in this show
Mhm.
and how they cover that in 12 episodes.
I wonder if it'll be a thing that maybe takes several seasons to get payoff on.
Ooh.
Because I think they're already renewed for a season 2.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm see. I could only. I don't wanna sound like I'm predicting a doom or anything, but I can only imagine, like, maybe 3 seasons for the storyline, uh, like, at the pace that they're telling these stories.
Mhm.
Although, again, 3 seasons is enough time. The Avatar: The Last Airbender was 3 seasons.
The original
and did
Star Trek was 3 seasons.
exactly. So it's like, yeah, that is enough time. They can do it. It's just the pacing in the show is so wild at the moment, even with episode 3 slowing things down. That I don't know. I'm skeptical, but I'm optimistic because I'm same with
You're
the
skeptimistic.
yes, I'm skeptimistic just like with the bait and switch, the misdirection with the dragon,
Mhm.
where I was like, if they're clever, they'll do this. Oh, they did it. Good, they're clever, type of thing. Um, like I'm optimistic. I'm looking forward to being surprised, pleasantly surprised.
Talking about leaning on tropes for character creation, my first and only thought with Grog was, did they just rip this off Minsk from Baldur's Gate?
See,
Character design, behavior,
fortunately, he doesn't have a
a space
hamster.
hamster.
Yeah, and that's kind of again, like I'm not certain which players had experience in D&D or even had like a knowledge base in it, but like when you start making something and you hear what the kind of like when I'm working at Alpha and somebody comes in and they're like, "Oh, I've heard about D&D." That's the thing where you can like you can seduce a dragon, right? And it's like, "Ah, so you've heard of D&D through the memes." And it's that kind of thing where like you see a lot of characters when people are building their character for the first time, their characters built off of their amalgam knowledge of memes.
Hmm.
Um, and this goes back even before like the full-fledged internet meme was a thing. Back when I was making characters when I first started playing. It's just that idea like, oh, you hear what a barbarian is supposed to be dumb and strong. And the only way to make dumb and strong fun is to make him goofy dumb and strong. Otherwise he's edgy dumb and strong, and that doesn't work great for a player character. And it's just that kind of thing. So to a degree, I don't think Travis Willingham knew anything about Minx. There we go.
Minsk.
Minsk. Thank you. I have that card too. Uh, I don't think he did, but now that you mention it, that is where what that character reminds me of a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's probably fair that it's a convergent evolution kind of thing.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's like not even really a complaint. It's just something I noticed and thought about.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
that's there's a lot of other characters like the whole Vex and Vax storyline, the twin half elves, and then you hear more about their backstory, and it's like they're both archetypes of that
Hmm.
type of
Archetype
character.
archetype is a very polite way of saying tropey.
Yes. They're archetypes because they're famous. It's
Hmm.
kind of like if you're famous, you don't get murdered, you get assassinated. Um, that because everybody knows Critical Role in the D&D community. They are examples. They're exemplars of an archetype.
Fair enough. Gabe, are we invested enough to come back and watch the next 3 episodes next week?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
When do they drop?
Friday. They come
Oh,
out
good.
3 episodes every Friday, so we get the weekend to watch it and talk about it.
Perfect.
All right. Well, we will be back maybe next Monday. We'll just see how the timing on that works out. It'll be soon enough after it airs that it won't seem like we dropped the ball,
Yes.
but
Yeah,
also
hopefully.
not so quick as to indicate we're trying to run a news channel or something here.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, and
Gotham
we'll
News
see if
coming
we'll see
later
if
on.
Josh's flexibility improves a little bit, and if he's
He
able
has
to
a
join
whole
up.
week to watch 6 episodes. He's got this.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's going to be the top of his priority. But regardless, Gabe and I will be back probably in a week. Josh and I will be back in a week. So who knows? We may drop 2 episodes next Monday. We'll see what happens. But we'll be
Exciting.
we'll be back. We hope you all enjoyed this. We just thought it might be fun to talk about it. It's more than just D&D adjacent, so we figured it would be a good fit for
Yeah.
us to talk about.
Like all opinions of Critical Role and uh animation and like all those things like aside, like this show does represent a big shift in what people will accept as content, and I mean that in a good way.
Mhm.
Like, it is a change. I don't think any like, you have lots of shows that are based off of, or lots of movies that are based off of this kind of stuff,
Mhm.
someone's campaign adventure, but this is, like, the first time where it's actually directly off of someone's specific home adventure type of thing.
I think in 5 years, we'll look back at this and be like, "Wow, that was way better than that new Dungeons& and Dragons movie that's supposed to be coming out."
Oh, no.
Yeah. That'll be a
That
separate review that we do.
that's the Ridleyest thing I've ever heard.
We should review the D&D movie that came out in 2000 and something.
Gosh, I hate that movie
I
so
saw it in
much,
a
but I
theater.
have I remember it perfectly, and that's why I dislike it, 'cause it's burnt into my brain.
Let's review that after Vox Machina is over.
It's just absolutely Ridley, the whole movie. Yes, let's do that.
All right, everybody. I'm Brandon at Way of Brandalore on Twitter.
And I'm Gabriel, Amethyst Audiomancer on Instagram.
Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back with more of Vox Machina recap, review, criticism, praise, hopefully in about a week. Have a good one.
Bye.
If you've somehow found this podcast but are unaware of Quid Pro Roll, 1, that's amazing. 2, you should check out Quid Pro Roll. It's an actual play adventure. Look it up on your podcasting app of choice and check it out.